If you want to hear how the mythological monster the Wendigo from the Pet Sematary novel was hidden throughout this movie, then stick around to the end of this video. The opening of Mary Lambert's 1989 adaptation of Pet Sematary contains a montage of kids over the years laying their pets down to rest in the pet cemetery. And this scene contains a lot of Easter eggs referencing some of the pets memorialized in the cemetery in King's novel. For example, we hear a young Judd saying goodbye to his dog Spot. And see the grave, which was carved by Mr. Judson Crandall. There are also grave markers for Hannah, who is regarded as the best dog that ever lived. The book mentions Hannah died in 1939, making this one of the oldest readable grave markers. One of the more recent ones was Biffer, which you can see right here. Smokey the Cat is another pet that was mentioned in the book, but Smokey was actually the real-world cat that belonged to Stephen King's daughter Naomi, and the cat was struck down by a truck in Orrington, Maine. A short time after, King's son Owen had a close call with another truck on that road, and the incident served as the inspiration for the novel. We're introduced to the road in the movie with a shot of a truck barreling over the camera. The low angle foreshadows the view that Gage might have had during his final moments. Another foreshadowing can be seen in the bumper sticker on Lewis's car, which reads, "Have you hugged your MD today?" which could be a reference to the ending embrace between Lewis and zombie Rachel. So the Creed family moves into their new home, and their daughter Ellie finds the tire swing. As she swings, she hears a creepy sound coming from the forest path that leads to the pet cemetery. If you haven't read the book, this is easy enough to chalk up to a moose or something else in the woods, but those familiar with the novel may be reminded of the Wendigo, the Micmac legend said to be responsible for souring the earth upon which the Indian burial ground is located. In the book, the Wendigo's power over the town of Ludlow is talked about several times, and Lewis comes face to face with the creature when he takes Gage up to the burial ground. However, in this movie, the Wendigo is not mentioned or seen, but it is teased at several more times throughout the film. Ellie's tire swing falls, and as Lewis and Rachel tend to her, their son Gage wanders towards the road. Their new neighbor, Judd Crandall, scoops him up and gets him to safety. The next day, the family gets to unpacking, and you can spot the toy that Gage is playing with is actually a red truck, and he crashes it into a box. You may also spot that Gage has a whole box of toy trucks, which may explain why he's always wandering towards the road. Maybe he just has a fascination with trucks. But that's not the only thing that causes disaster to strike. The influence of the Wendigo also plays a part, but we'll get back to that in a little bit. As Rachel comes in with the groceries, we meet the caretaker Missy Dandridge, who tells Rachel that she was lucky to marry a doctor, and that she wishes she had a doctor to help her with her stomach pains. She also mentions that she's not married. In the book, Missy is married to a man named Roger, or possibly David. The name erroneously changes halfway through the book. Later that day, Judge shows them the way to the pet cemetery. Lewis carries Gage in the baby backpack, and this would not be the first time that he carries his son up that path. Rachel is uncomfortable bringing the kids to the cemetery because of her aversion to death. In the background, you can see the grave marker for Marta the rabbit. These graves just go to show the level of detail put into the production design, and I thought I'd point them out because you might not have picked up on them while watching the movie. Before they leave, the call of the Wendigo can be heard again in the woods. Cut to the real monster of this story. See, Gage, this is why nobody saved you when you went out in the road. Oh man, I'm going to hell. So Lewis is leaving for his first day of work at the university, and his wife comes to say goodbye to him. I think there's something up with the color yellow foreshadowing death in this movie. Not only are Rachel and Gage wearing yellow, but the flowers are yellow, the house is yellow, and Church's carrying case is yellow. So in the scene, everyone who dies in the movie has yellow on them. Missy Dandridge's sweater isn't yellow, but she does have yellow flowers on her skirt, and the flowers seen later at her memorial are in fact yellow. Another interesting note about the scene is that Rachel repeatedly calls Lewis Doc, which makes sense because he's a doctor, but also a partial reference to Danny's nickname in The Shining.
How'd you like some ice cream, Doc?
Another Stephen King reference can be spotted in the next scene, where this university student, Victor Pascow, is brought into Lewis's care after being hit by a truck. On the bulletin board, there's a poster warning about rabies, in which a photo of Cujo, another Stephen King adaptation made in the 1980s, can be seen. This is more than just a fun reference, though. Judd actually explains in the book that rabies is an issue in Maine, and even cites the events of Cujo taking place a few years prior. So anyways, Lewis is unable to save Pascow because he's basically DOA. Lewis gets a big surprise when Pascow unexpectedly jumps back to life and tells him, "The soil of a man's heart is stonier." This is a recurring line in the book, but what does it actually mean? The full quote in the book is, "The soil of a man's heart is stonier, Lewis. A man grows what he can and he tends it. Stony soil is known to be harder to grow anything in than fertile soil." He's telling Lewis that the love that he has for his family cannot be easily replaced, that bringing their bodies back to life in the burial ground does not mean they'd be the same people that Lewis has grown to love. Pascal's ghost comes back that night to try to warn Lewis to stay away from the Micmac burial ground, who are apparently having a rave of some sort. Pascal tells Lewis the reason that he wants to help him.
"I want to help you because, Lewis, because you tried to help me."
Okay, I can understand that line in the book, but in the movie, he just takes one look at him and gives up. I mean, he puts about as much effort into saving Pascal as he does that one time he tried to rake the leaves. Speaking of leaves, Thanksgiving gets here, and the family goes to visit Rachel's parents in Chicago while Lewis stays back to work, when he gets a call from Judd. It's about Ellie's cat, Church, and he's fallen victim to the road. Judd takes him up to bury the cat, but instead of stopping at the Pet Sematary, Lewis ignores Pascal's warnings and follows Judd to the Micmac burial ground. A strange noise is heard nearby.
Judd, what's that? Just alone.
This is perhaps the closest we get to a direct acknowledgement of the Wendigo, but there are a couple more references later on. When we get to the burial ground, an overhead shot shows that it uses the same concentric circles layout as the Pet Sematary, but not quite as same as the spiral layout described in the book. Lewis buries Church, and to his dismay, Church returns from the dead, only now with a much nastier attitude. Lewis doesn't care though, as long as he doesn't have to explain Church's death to Ellie. He goes to meet them at the airport. Wait a minute, did he just pick these from his wife's garden? Oh, and also these are yellow flowers, meaning someone's about to die. And the winner is... it's Missy Nandridge. Why couldn't she have married a doctor? Rachel stays home from the funeral with Gage, still not able to overcome her fear of death because of what happened to her sister Zelda when she was young. She totally misses out though, because Stephen King makes a cameo appearance as the minister. Rachel finally opens up to Lewis about how her sister suffered from spinal meningitis, and the whole experience was extremely scarring for her, right down to the creepy painting in her parents' house. If you thought that Zelda dying was hard, Rachel, oh, just wait, because this truck driver can't control his speed when he's blasting Sheena is a Punk Rocker by the Ramones. The song choice is a little nod to the use of Blitzkrieg Bop, the Ramones song that seems to be stuck in Lewis's head all throughout the novel. He's constantly thinking about the lyrics. Hey, ho, let's go. I think it's a sign of the town manipulating him, because the lyrics always seem to pop into his head when he's thinking of digging up Gage to move him to the Micmac grounds. This is because the Wendigo has the power to put those thoughts into Lewis's head, because as long as he's in Ludlow, as long as he's close enough to the cursed ground, he remains under its control. Remember how I said that Gage's fascination with trucks wasn't the only thing that caused him to wander into the street? Well, during what I have come to call the scene, as soon as Gage lets go of the kite, a huge gust of wind blows it into the street, and you can actually see items flying off the picnic table. This is no coincidence. It's similar to how in the book, the truck driver says he wasn't speeding, but gets the sudden urge to drive recklessly as soon as he crosses over into Ludlow. Keeping up with the yellow motif, Gage Creed's final outfit is a pair of yellow overalls. Now, despite what I said earlier, I actually do feel bad for him now that I see that he's a Cubs fan. Everybody type F in the comments to pay your respects to Gage. Gage's casket is decorated with yellow flowers, and things go from worse to even more worse when Rachel's father starts a fight with Lewis at the viewing ceremony. After the funeral, Judd realizes that Lewis may be getting the idea to put Gage up in the Micmac burial ground, so he tells him a story that he withheld the first time they went there. The story of Timmy Baterman, a man who came back as a monster after being buried there. In the flashback, Timmy Baterman shouts the phrase, "Love dead, living," a reference to the horror classic Bride of Frankenstein.
I love dead. Living.
Lewis sends his family ahead to Chicago once again, claiming that he needs to close some things up at work, but really plotting to dig up Gage and attempt to revive him at the Micmac grounds. He goes to the cemetery where Gage rests in broad daylight for some reason, and Pascal appears to him, standing in front of a tomb with the name Thomas C. Farr. I almost wonder if the see far is a reference to Ellie's psychic abilities, like how she has the dream about Church dying and then the dream about Lewis dying, even though she's across the country when these events take place. Also, the flowers around Gage's grave completely change from shot to shot, leaving only the yellow flowers. Ellie sees Pascal in her dream, and when Rachel puts 2 and 2 together, she senses something is wrong and rushes for the first flight home to get to Lewis, but not before having another vision of her sister Zelda.
Get you for letting us die.
Meanwhile, Lewis takes Gage's body to the area beyond the Pet Sematary. Listen to this laughter heard echoing through the woods. Maybe that's actually one of the loons that Judd had mentioned, or it could just be the ghost of one of the Micmac tribesmen. This is the point at which Lewis comes face to face with the Wendigo in the book. As I mentioned, the creature doesn't appear in the film, but not showing it is actually very unsettling, because if you are familiar with the story, you kind of know that it's probably just off screen during the scene, and I find that kind of haunting. Rachel rents a car to transport her the final stretch back home, but suddenly blows a tire when she gets close. Like the wind that blew the kite into the road, I feel like this tire popping is no coincidence. She ironically hitches a ride with an Orinco truck driver. However, she doesn't realize that she's actually on the road to her own death, which is reflected in the number 666 on the right side of the truck. The last Wendigo reference shows up in Judd Crandall's room. The Wendigo is described as being an extremely tall bipedal creature with the stag's head and antlers. The candle holder on Judd's mantle takes this form and could represent the fact that the evil spirit is now in this room looking at Judd, which it is in the form of Gage, who's come back as a zombie, and also in the form of Church, who distracts Judd before Gage finishes him off with his father's scalpel. Have you hugged your MD today? Rachel finally makes it home, but the sound of Zelda's voice sends her into Judd's house instead of her own. She goes up into Judd's room where she hallucinates her son's image to be that of Zelda. When she finally sees Gage for what he is, he's wearing the outfit of the creepy painting in her parents' house, the place where she watched her sister die. The outfit on Gage and the painting also matches what Zelda wore on her deathbed. This is in line with the actions of the stories of those who came back from the burial ground, like Timmy Baterman and Hanratty the Bull from the book. The spirit that has taken over Gage's body knows the secrets of Rachel's past and is using this costume to bring up the repressed torment of her childhood. She's unable to see past her son's form, however, and she becomes his next victim. Lewis wakes up to the sound of Rachel's screams. He comes down and sees the footprints, filling him in on what has happened. Rachel's father calls to make sure that she made it all right, and just as he lied to Ellie after Church's death and told her that the cat was fine, he lies to Mr. Goldman and says that Rachel is still asleep. Then he gets a call from Gage at Judd Crandall's house and realizes that he too has been possessed by the evil spirit. He knows what he must do.
Forgive me, Master, but I must go all out, just this once.
Today is Thanksgiving Day for cats.
Play dead! Be dead!
So with everyone dead, that leaves us with only 2 more things you missed remaining. Lewis burns down Judd's house just as Judd burned down the Baterman house to cleanse the evil all of those years ago. But Lewis is deranged at this point, and he believes that if he takes his late wife to the burial ground right away, that she can still come back normal. To pass the time waiting for her to get back, he plays solitaire on the kitchen floor. When Rachel arrives, he has a jack, queen, and a 2 flipped up to represent those who died: Judd, Rachel, and the 2-year-old Gage. Unfortunately for the doc, Rachel comes back as a zombie, and the movie ends just before she stabs him in the back. Cue the end credits with an original song by the Ramones, as one final callback to the constant Ramones references in Stephen King's novel. This song is actually a certifiable bop. Maybe one of the last great Ramones songs, actually. Okay, I was listening to that Ramones song, and look what YouTube decided to autoplay. This is savagery. This is pure savagery, YouTube. So that's it for the things you missed in the 1989 adaptation of Pet Sematary. However, for some reason, there's a sequel, even though the book does not have a sequel, like at all. And for some other reason, there's a remake coming out. I'll be covering both of those movies here on Things You Missed in the next couple weeks, so remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring that death bell for notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. assuming we both survive.